Hey y'all, it's Jen and welcome back to my channel Ifers Inklings. In this video series, I will be discussing the short stories in the Best American Short Stories 2018 edition as edited by Roxane Gay. Now, as a disclaimer, I just want you to know that I am no expert in literature. I really don't know what I'm doing here, but we're going to dive through this anyway and see what we can learn from the text and from just this experience altogether. Also, this is a discussion video, so it will contain spoilers. So if you are interested in any of these stories but don't want spoilers to them, then be sure and click out of this video, go pick up this book, read the story I'm about to talk about, and come back and discuss it with me in this video. Hey y'all, it's Jen and welcome back to my channel, Ifers Inklings. This is my short story discussion for A Family by Jamel Brinkley, and this is from the Gulf Coast, and it is out of the Best American Short Stories collection, 2018 collection, edited by Roxane Gay. So I'm just going to dive into this. This one was a little weird for me. I don't know what to think about this one. It was just a weird story. There were themes in it: hope, despair, repentance, friendship, family. Obviously, it's called A Family. Love, loss, and jealousy. This short story is about 25 pages long. So in this short story, we are introduced to Curtis Smith, who has just recently gotten out of jail for vehicular manslaughter. He hit a lady with his car, and obviously she died. And he is following a woman and her child. And it's not really apparent in the beginning what his relationship is to this woman and child. I do want to say that the visual descriptions in this story were wonderful. That was the highlight of this story for me. The story itself kind of bounced all over the place. It was never cohesive, and until the last really couple of paragraphs of this story, I still didn't know what the hell was actually going on. There were some really good quotes in this story though. So let me introduce you to this first paragraph. I'm actually going to just read the first whole paragraph to you because the descriptions in this is phenomenal. Curtis Smith watched from across the street as the boy argued with Lena Johnson in front of a movie theater. She had probably bought tickets for the wrong movie, or maybe Andre didn't want to see any movie with his mother on a Friday night. Her expression went from pleading to irate. The boy said nothing more. With his head taking on weight, hung as though his neck couldn't hold it, he followed as she went inside. You can actually visually get a picture of that in your mind. We've seen it 100 times in our everyday actions, and it was just, all of his writing is so vivid like that. We find out right away that he is watching Lena and Andre, but we don't know what his relationship is with her. Curtis, we later find out that Lena is Curtis's best friend's woman, and the boy is his son. His name is Marvin. We also find out that Marvin is dead and has been dead for a while. We know that he was killed in a fire. We learn that early on, but we don't know what the circumstances is. And we also learn that Curtis kills the woman about the same time or shortly thereafter Marvin is killed in the house fire. It's a house fire. After Marvin is killed in the fire, we learn that shortly after that is when Curtis hits the woman with his car, and we find out that he's been drinking and driving, and that is what the cause of the accident is. In the beginning of the story, you don't know exactly what ethnic background these characters are. 4 or 5 pages in though, Curtis is describing a woman that he's standing next to on a street corner, and white is the way he's used to describe her. So we know that Curtis isn't white. Because if he was, Curtis wouldn't point out the color of this woman as being white if he was also white. Curtis really feels very stalkerish, and that kind of put me off on this story a little bit. As he is stalking her, though, because he is stalking her, he follows her to a restaurant. He knows where she works. He is staying close enough that he can hear the conversation between her and her son. And at one point, they are overlooking the river, and I get the impression they're in New York City, probably the Brooklyn area is where I'm guessing, but there's a river that they're sitting there looking that overlooks the city. And he makes this statement: given all the nights I've spent here since getting out, it felt like a triumph that he no longer thought of feeding himself to the water. So obviously he's been suicidal. He spent 12 years in prison. And he's learning how to adjust himself to the world right now. And he still feels despair at times, and like maybe he doesn't want to be a part of this world. Here is another really good example of the writing style and the descriptive nature of this work. The only other person he saw was a man with an unsettling face. The man's bouts of muttering formed clouds that flowered like visible emblems of his secret language before being pulled apart by the wind. But it was the way this man's hands jumped within his dirty coat as he shuffled along that marked him as dangerous and insane. And that was the description of a homeless man that Curtis encountered. There really wasn't any reason for the encounter. I don't know what it was. It felt like it was setting it up for something, but it never really came into fruition. And then we get this line in the text. It says, but his life was for other things now. He had been desperately telling himself beautiful and wonderful things. So that is his hope, that he is going to, he's moved from that despair stage into the hope, the feelings of hope, because he knows that his life can be full of beautiful and wonderful things. And, we still really don't know what's going on at this point. Curtis is just kind of wandering the streets of the city and following Lena and Andre. And Lena the next night goes out with her friends from work, and she's all dolled up, and she goes out to a club, and of course Curtis goes and follows her there. There were some points in this book that really kind of irritated me too, though. This is one of them. Although he and Lena were the same age, 35, Curtis was upset to see her carrying on like this. Feeling sorry for the boy and somehow for Marvin, he wished he had just gone to the promenade. The promenade is the place where he can overlook the river. But so he's seeing her in this bar, dancing with other people, having a good time, and she's 35. But he's embarrassed for her and a little angry and a little upset because he didn't think she should be acting that way, having a child, and almost as if she were being disrespectful to Marvin's memory. But he's attracted to her because we get this line when he first sees her getting out of the car going into the bar or the club. It says, the shock of seeing her dolled up was slight. But after she vanished through the door, every scene that proceeded on this stage of his mind featured the nylons and the sapphire dress and ended in foolishness. So Lena goes out, smokes a cigarette, comes back in, finds Curtis sitting there. She goes up to him and talks to him at the bar. She is like, look, dude, I know you have been, around. I've seen you. You're not as slick as you think you are. What do you want? Let's just do this, okay? He is trying to get close to Andre. We see that in the first couple of paragraphs of this short story. And he's talking about how he would raise him and things that he would teach Andre, which were a little unsettling to me. And I'm going to read two of these passages to you. One says, obedience, he thought. He could talk to the boy about that. He'd been making a list of topics they could discuss. The question of obedience was right for a boy of 15, when the man he would become was beginning to erupt out of him like horns. though sometimes it was important to disobey. And then a few sentences down, he says, a man decides his own way, and there came a time when a boy growing up into his manhood had to as well. In the club, when he is meeting with Lena and they're talking about getting going somewhere more private. And he makes the statement, getting mixed up in her night wasn't the best way to get closer to the boy, but it might be the only way. And I still don't understand, at this point in the story, we still don't understand why he's trying to get close to the boy. Now, I have to admit, I love Lena in this story. She is feisty, and she is strong and strong-willed, and we get a little bit of a flashback later on in the story of her childhood and why Marvin was so attracted to her and their interactions. But her and Curtis go to a hotel room, they hook up, and they were talking about things, and she makes this statement. You know, she told him, if it was my boy you were interested in, there were easier ways than sniffing after my behind. You could have just walked up to him on the street and told him who you were. And then, Curtis isn't happy about that. And then she tells him, you know, I knew you were here. And his remark is, so this is what you decided to do about it? And Lena responds with, well, you were there, sniffing as usual, Lena said. I had my notions, and you just happened to be the one. I knew you were safe, and I figured you'd go along with it. He yanked off the sheet and exposed the full nakedness of his body. He sprang from the bed and glared down at her. I'm all done with that, she told him. You can put it away now. I just love her so much. She's 35 years old. She was looking for a hookup. He was there. She knew who he was. She knew he was safe. He'd been in prison for 12 years. Although that probably isn't necessarily a good judge. But, he said, you don't know me. And she was like, you don't know me either. He's been in prison for 12 years and people change. He doesn't know anything about her. So Curtis and Lena continue to hook up for the next couple of pages, off and on. And we get to learn a little bit more about how they know each other and how Marvin and Curtis met Lena. And you get it becomes very obvious that Curtis is jealous of Lena. So at one point, they're in bed together, and he asks Lena to tell him about Marvin. And the whole thing is just weird. It just is weird and creepy to me. And, she's like, you were there. You know what happened as much as I do. I was at work. He was tired. He'd been working a bunch. And he was a smoker. He fell asleep with a lit cigarette and caught the bed on fire and himself on fire. And we find out that this was the time that Lena was pregnant. So Andre never met his father because his father died before he was born. When Lena and Marvin first started dating, Marvin was happy with Lena, and Curtis was extremely jealous of that. And when Curtis and Marvin were talking, Marvin was like, this is a real deal. Can't you just be happy with me? And Curtis is like, but what about me? And Marvin's like, why does this got to be about you? This is about me and about how I love Lena. And Curtis's response to that is, I just can't believe you let a bitch get in between us. And that was when he was a kid, teenager, 17, 18, 19, somewhere in there. And then we see that progression as his relationship with Lena progresses. He's intentionally cruel and says at one point that he wanted to hurt her. Curtis is just a dick, a jealous dick. And as he's replaying the conversation and his history with Marvin, right before he died, Marvin reached out to Curtis and was like, look, I'm on hard times. Lena's pregnant. We've got a baby coming. I can't find work. Can you help me out? And Curtis says, well, maybe that bitch you got can help you out, and hangs up on Marvin. And that was like the last thing he said to Marvin. Again, jealous dick there. you still don't really get the impression of what is going on. Why is he after Lena? Because he couldn't stand her. Obviously, he was jealous of her and Marvin's relationship. Why is he so interested in the boy? It's just still weird. Although right towards the end of the story, we do get this sentence. They're in bed together. So Curtis lives with his mother at this point, and they're in his little twin bed at his mother's house, having just had sex. And she leans up and looks at him, and this is what it says. She knew she could never be loved by him. He had told her as much as they talked before falling asleep. Maybe she already knew she couldn't love him either. He held her, though, in the little bed, and then she held him too. So that sentence to me really shows how two people who have loved the same person can find comfort in each other. They may not really be able to love each other, but they can find comfort in each other and get what they need from each other because they've loved the same person. And then, so again, they continue this relationship, and Curtis starts to spend a lot more time with Andre, spend a lot more time at their house, sometimes does sleepovers with Lena, and he's taking Andre out, and his rapport with Andre is very demeaning to Lena, and he's just a fucking ass about it. And then, so on these last 2 pages of the story, we finally figure out what the hell is going on here. Lena and Curtis has moved into Lena and Andre's house. Curtis is having a conversation with Andre, and he tells him, you can always ask me anything about your dad that you want. I'll be glad to talk to you about him. And he's a typical 15-year-old boy. He's like, I know, you loved him like a brother. No, Curtis says. That's what people keep saying, but it was more than that, a lot more. He was startled by the sound of his own voice, the force of it. He gazed down at his curled hands, unable to bear the gentle, curious way Andre was looking at him. He couldn't find the words to explain the affection he felt, still, for the boy's father, and in this moment, he didn't want to be misunderstood. So that sentence there, that exchange, that paragraph, really brings you to that aha moment of the story where you're like, oh, Curtis was in love with Marvin, and he felt that Lena took Marvin away from him. Andre is his connection to Marvin. Lena and Curtis's relationship is very strained. At the end of this story, they're still playing house. And I think it's really because Lena really needs the extra help. She needs a man in the house for Andre, and Curtis is the best option. They do still sometimes have sex, but it is more perfunctory. It's more of a chore than anything else. And this story ends with this line. He and Lena wouldn't love each other, but there was love they openly shared, and that would be enough for now to make a kind of family. So they knew that they couldn't love each other, but they had a love for Andre, and they had a love for Marvin, and because of that, they were able to make a family. I still have a lot of weird, icky feelings about this story. I gave it 3 stars. There was really good writing in it, and I could see at the end of the story how it all came together, but there was so much disjointed stuff in the first 28-30 pages of it that it just didn't flow well. I mean, we followed Curtis, but we still never really understood what was going on. What was the point of the old man on the bridge, the homeless person there? Why did we get all these different scenes? And there were a lot more that I didn't even point out. But in all, I thought the writing was phenomenal as far as style of writing. I loved the descriptions of the sentences that were used to describe what Curtis was seeing. It was so vivid, and I just felt like I was there, and I could picture this person. I could picture that homeless man standing there with his hands in his pockets and they're fiddling around, and with that look on his face and the craziness, of the insanity that had taken over this homeless man, and you didn't know if he was filling with a piece of paper or some change, or if he had a gun in a pocket. That was the vividness of that paragraph there. And I could picture it all. So I enjoyed that, but I did not enjoy the relationship between Lena and Curtis. I didn't enjoy Curtis at all. I thought he was a miserable man. And it just felt icky the way he wanted so much to insert him into Andre's life. So that's it. That is my discussion of A Family. And if you've read this story, let me know what you thought about it down below. Did I miss something in it? Did you see things a little differently? Did you pick up on the love from Curtis to Marvin earlier on than I did? I could sense the jealousy there, but I didn't understand the reason behind it until much later on in the story. So that's it. If you've enjoyed this video, you know what to do. Please give me a like, share, subscribe, and be sure and leave me a comment down below. And until next time, I'll talk to you later. Bye.